Hey, what's up everybody, Nexil here. Today we're playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and we're going to be talking about the new Supernova Illustrated Zexion medal that just dropped a few days ago in Global. Now this is a very difficult medal to explain because you have to know quite a few things in order to maximize his strength. You have to know about buffs and debuffs, you have to know about status ailments, how they activate, you have to know about PvP, how Supernova Attacks activate, as well as why triggering before a certain slot matters. So there's a lot of background information to understand before knowing this medal and understanding how to use it, so I recommend reading my notes before hopping into this video. Remember that all my notes and all my medal templates are in my Discord, so there is the link. Go ahead, type that into your URL and you should have access. But as always, we are going to do our banner analysis. We'll talk about the medal, the draw odds, and finally my thoughts and recommendations on whether or not I think you should be pulling for this medal. So first things first, with any new banner or any new avatar board, or pretty much anything that you have to spend jewels on, you want to see how long it's going to be active for. In this case, this banner is active until September 2nd, and that's really relevant because JP anniversary is September 3rd. That means that this medal and banner will disappear before JP anniversary, literally by one day. That's important because remember that the day before, in Global at least, we get a notice of what's coming out the next day, 4 hours before reset. So I recommend waiting until the last few hours. Again, we're probably going to get a notice around 8 p.m. PST. I'd wait until those last 4 hours before deciding if you want to pull for Supernova Illustrated Zexion. Now, looking at the banner itself, every single pull is going to cost you 3,000 jewels. You'll get 3 Kingdom Hearts 3 medals, which will generally be used as subslot material. You'll sell it for draw points, or you keep it for some sort of special attack, such as Kingdom Hearts 3 Anti-Aqua's 100% Magic Medal Reflection. You also get 1 trait medal. You get 6 5-star or higher medals, which will generally be used as subslots, or you'll sell them for draw points. You get 10 VIP coins with every single pull. Now, this is interesting because this banner lasts from August going into September. Remember that VIP coins only last until the end of the month. So if you pull for this medal in August, your VIP coins are only good until August 31st. If you pull for this medal in September, they're good for the rest of the month. So pay attention when you pull because that determines when your VIP coins expire. You also get 3 magic gems with every pull, and you are guaranteed a copy of Supernova Illustrated Zexion within 5 pulls. That means we're looking at about 15,000 jewels to guarantee 1 copy of the medal, as well as an additional 2,000 to 3,000 jewels on trait packs in the Moogle shop in order to get perfect traits. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Illustrated Zexion. So he is going to be a tier 10 reverse magic medal that hits all targets. He has a strength of 49,654 after chips and dales, and this is among the highest strength in the game. So it's 400 on average, about 400 points higher than the Sora, Riku, and Kairi medals that just dropped. So he is a very, very strong medal. He has a defense of 21,624 and a multiplier, and this is where things get a little bit crazy, of base 21.52, which is still good, because remember, our new medals were expecting about a multiplier of around 21 to 22, but at the highest, it's 37.37, and that is absolutely ridiculous. That is the highest multiplier in the game. The trade-off is that it has a horrendous damage plus condition, which we will get to in just a minute. So activation of the special attack costs 3 gauges. The medal does 6 hits that do affect count, so it can be used for recovery buffing. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the special attack. It is going to give you 1 turn buffs. It gives all medals plus 8,000 strength, which is really good for generic buffing. Remember, one of the good things about Supernova Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi is that she gave all medals strength, meaning that even if she was off slot, if she wasn't on the correct Keyblade multiplier, she still gave medal strength to all of the other medals. It's the same concept with Illustrated Zexion, and that's a good thing about this medal. It gives strength regardless of power, speed, magic, upright, reverse, doesn't matter what the attribute is. In terms of buffs, he also gets special attack bonus plus 220%, which is not as relevant because we rely on Supernova Attacks to give us plus 300% or 320%. Remember, only the highest number goes through for this one. However, looking at the buffs and debuffs, one really important thing to notice is that this medal offers absolutely no general, upright, reverse, or power speed magic buffs or debuffs. That means this medal must be buffed beforehand. This is really relevant because it means you need another medal entirely in order to buff this one. And this is really important for beginners because one thing for beginners to note is that there's absolutely no consistent way of getting reverse medal strength right now. So in terms of the Illustrated Zexion banner, again, there's no reverse buffs or debuffs. For the reverse power medal deal, some of them don't give any reverse buffs or debuffs. So you're kind of pulling on straws and gambling for luck. It's the same idea with the one-hit special attack deal. Only 2 of these give reverse metal buffs or debuffs. The beginner's deal, while it is a good deal, only gives you a mercy for Kingdom Hearts 3 Kyrie A, which is only going to buff upright, so it does not buff reverse buffs or debuffs. The daily deal, yes, you have a chance at getting Nominate, but it's just super inconsistent. So again, no consistent way of getting reverse buffs. And same idea with the draw points deal. There's so many medals that you're not guaranteed one that gives you reverse buffs or debuffs. So it's really important to know that the medal special attack doesn't do any sort of buffs or debuffs, because that means you have to have another medal entirely to get the most amount of damage out of this medal. In terms of effects, this is where we get to the damage plus condition, where his multiplier is higher if the targets are paralyzed. Now, this is a very odd damage plus condition. It's actually the first of its kind, and it's really, really good for PvP, but really, really bad for PvE. So let's go ahead and show you some setups and talk about why this isn't exactly the best for PvE. So looking at our medals here, likely the skill that you're going to be using with this medal is going to be Attack Boost Max and Paralysis. Now, don't quote me on this, but if you attach this skill to Zexion, I don't know, and again, don't quote me on this, I believe that the Paralysis would activate before the special attack multiplier would. So you should still be getting that 37.37. Again, I don't plan on testing it. If someone in the comments below can let me know exactly how it works, that would be great. I don't unfortunately plan on pulling for Zexion, so I don't really plan on testing this one. But one thing about this skill, and this is one of the big points and why it's really good for PvP but not PvE, the skill is only effective on enemies up to level 1999. Now, this is really good for PvP. The reason is the level cap is, I believe as of right now, it's level 900. And that means that this will always guarantee a paralysis on the enemy as long as they don't have something like paralysis resist 100% or something like that. So this guarantees paralysis, and that means it guarantees that multiplier. However, it's only up to level 1999, and that's why it's not good for PvE, because when it comes to PvE, the enemies become really difficult at around level 2500, which is far above this 1999 range. So when we look at other skills when it comes to paralysis, so let's go ahead and take a look at Triple Threat, which is another skill that can give you paralysis. When we look at the effective level range, let's just scroll all the way to the end here. Again, only effective on enemies up to level 1999. Good for PvP, bad for PvE. Now, when you're a beginner, you likely don't have access to Triple Threat at all, and you have access to one Attack Boost Max Paralysis skill in the skill enhancement board, so likely the paralysis skill you're thinking about is just the regular standard paralysis that you can get from draws, or you can get them from the PvE Coliseum board. But one important thing to note about this skill is that it does not activate with special attacks. It only activates with normal tap attacks or normal swipe attacks, which is really, really bad for PvP. Remember that in PvP, when you're defending, when you're the one that's being attacked, all your medals will activate their special attack unless you run out of gauges. And that's definitely not a scenario you want to be in where you run out of gauges. So this is not a really good skill for the medal, because when you're defending in PvP, you're just going to be activating all of your special attacks, meaning that this is going to get skipped entirely. When you're attacking in PvP, this is still not good, because that means you're doing a tap attack in place of a special attack, and that means you're missing out on a lot of damage. So it's important to know how the Attack Boost Max and Paralysis skill works, how the Triple Threat skill works, and how the standard Paralysis skill works in order to get that multiplier. Again, the high multiplier of 37.37 is only active when the enemy is paralyzed. Now let's go ahead and head back to the medal. Looking at its effects, it does have Defense Boost Piercing 35%, which is okay. It's only 5% more than our standard, which is 30%. But remember, we have Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas, and Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas had a Defense Boost Piercing of 50%, which is, I believe they should have kept this medal at 50% because it actually makes sense mathematically. Now let's go ahead and head over to some math, and let me get what I'm getting at with this 35% really not mattering too much, as opposed to 30%. So remember, for PvP medals, the number of hits the medal does is very relevant. In this case, Zexion only does 6 hits, so when we multiply that times 35%, it's only 2.1 hits. Now remember, you can't have 0.1 of a hit, so you have to round down, so that means 2 of those hits will pierce defense. If we compare it to 30%, 1.8 hits with a 30% medal is going to go through if it does 6 hits, and again, you can't have 0.8 of a hit, so you have to round up to 2 hits that pierce defense. So that 5% really doesn't matter. I did some additional math. It's pretty much every third activation. That 35% actually matters over 30%. So they really should have kept it at 50%, because at 50%, that means 3 of these hits on average are going to go through, and that's pretty significant when it comes to attacking in in PvP. So one big thing, again, it does not say count ±0, count +1, something like that. So the medal does affect count, and that means it can be used for recovery buffing. Looking at the Supernova attack, it does offer 1-turn buffs. It gives all medals plus 12,000 medal strength, which again is important because it applies to all medals regardless of their attribute. The Supernova attack also gives special attack bonus plus 320%, which is the norm for our new tier 10s. Looking at the effects, this is another great thing about this medal in PvP. So it has defense boost piercing 100%, which is pretty much a standard now for any fantastic PvP medal. That means all of the damage is breaking through defense boost max for sure. It is not dependent on something like a 50% chance, like a 30% chance, like the special attacks do. And remember, this damage can stack up very, very quickly, especially if you have Supernova Renew. So remember that a lot of the high tier PvP players have 2 Supernova Renew medals and then a bunch of medals that have 100% defense boost piercing with the Supernova attack. So let's just say you had this medal and you had 2 Kingdom Hearts 3 Aquas and 4 copies of this medal, you're likely going to win that PvP round unless they have 100% magic medal reflection or something like that. It's a lot of damage that can stack very, very quickly, so it's a really good effect to have on a PvP medal. This medal also triggers before slot 5 in terms of its Supernova attack, and that's actually very, very relevant. Now let me go ahead and show you an example as to why it's super important that it triggers before slot 5. So when it comes to PvP setups, one thing to remember is how these Supernova attacks activate and in what order. So Supernova attacks will activate based on their text when it says it triggers. So if we look at Leon Dissidia, at the very end it says triggers before slot 6 is activated when defending in PvP. So that takes precedence, and then when you have 2 medals that have the same activation time, so before slot 6 in this case, so for example, Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua also has a Supernova attack that triggers before slot 6 is activated. When you have 2 medals that have the same activation time, it's going to be based on where that medal is in the Keyblade. So when we compare the Leon and the Aqua, remember, we want the Leon to be in our pet slot because that's where it gets the highest multiplier, that's where it's going to do the most amount of damage, that's how we're going to get the most amount of damage for defense boost piercing. We want Leon to be later in the Keyblade. However, this doesn't work with Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua with the Supernova Renew ability, because when we go through the Keyblade in terms of our Supernova attacks activating, once we get to before slot 6, remember that Aqua and Leon both activate before slot 6, because Aqua is earlier in the Keyblade, her Supernova attack will go off before Leon's, and that means we are missing an activation of Dissidia Leon's Supernova attack, which pierces defense boost 100%. When we look at this setup, this is the setup where we get Leon's Supernova attack twice, because again, they both activate before slot 6. However, because of the ordering, Leon should activate before Aqua, and that gives you another Leon Supernova proc. But this is not as preferred because we are missing a lot of damage because the multiplier is significantly less on the 5th slot as opposed to the pet slot. Now looking at Zexion, before he triggers before slot 5, that means his Supernova attack goes off, and then the Renovas go off, so it doesn't matter if Illustrated Zexion is on the pet slot, which is where he is going to be best put, because his Supernova attack is still going to be reactivated by the Aqua. Again, it's kind of a complex thing to know, and you kind of have to test it for yourself in order for it to make the most amount of sense. Looking at the Supernova attack buffs and debuffs, one big important thing to know is just like the special attack, it does not give you any general, upright, reverse, or power speed magic buffs or debuffs, and again, this forces you to have another medal that gives you these buffs. That's another 15,000 jewels that you gotta spend, and it's usually not a good thing to need to spend more jewels. So looking at the draw odds, it's really nothing special. If you can't mercy this metal, don't pull for it. So what are my thoughts and recommendations on this metal? Well, one thing we have to answer before getting to that is the question, is this metal better than Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas for PvP? So what do we do in these cases? We do the math. So we gave Illustrated Zexion the benefit of the doubt. We're saying that the enemy is paralyzed, and that's why we see that 37.37 multiplier. So this is just the straight damage before the defense boost piercing kicks in. Now, looking at the defense boost piercing, it still doesn't make Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas better than Zexion at his strongest. Zexion is still going to do more damage than Vanitas. However, remember that this is with that 37.37 multiplier. If we're sticking to the 21.54 multiplier, Zexion actually does less damage than Vanitas. So Zexion can reach higher numbers, but he's just less consistent than Vanitas. This is very important for when you're at the high levels of PvP. People are starting to get smart about Illustrated Zexion. They start having buffers that have 100% paralysis resist. So Vanitas is more consistent. But in terms of raw damage, the Zexion is far better. Now, remember that one thing that a lot of people talk about with Zexion is that he's a magic metal. And a lot of people are saying he's a bad PvP metal because there's 100% magic metal reflection. So do I think that makes him a bad PvP metal? Not necessarily. There's a lot of different ways to get around that 100% magic metal reflection when it comes to PvP. So, for example, let me go ahead and show you a setup where you can get around this. So if we go to my game, this is an example, and we're going to have to use our imaginations here. So we have to pretend that this is Supernova++ Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas, and we have to pretend that this is the new Supernova++ Illustrated Zexion. Now remember that the Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas, the most recent one, is able to convert the next metal's attribute. So this is one way you get around that 100% magic metal reflection, because this Vanitas converts this magic metal into a speed metal, and that speed metal damage is going to bypass the 100% magic metal reflection. Another way of getting around 100% magic metal reflection is by choosing where you put your Keyblade with Zexion on it. So when you're attacking, remember that that's going to be best. Magic metals are going to be best as your first or your third Keyblade when you're on offense. When you're on offense, it means that you attack before the enemy's magic metal reflection can go up. When you are defending in PvP, magic metals are best suited on your second Keyblade, because remember, when you're on defense, your second Keyblade activates before their second Keyblade, meaning that your magic damage will go through before their magic damage reflection 100% goes up. So there's a lot of ways around the 100% magic metal reflection, so I don't think Zexion is bad for PvP. Again, his multiplier is ridiculous. If it goes through, you're likely going to win that round. So one other question to answer before we go to our thoughts and recommendations is that, can this metal still be used for PvE? Now remember that this metal's special attack and his Supernova attack give metal strength buff, and that's really relevant for high level Coliseum. So let me go ahead and show you what my high level Coliseum setup looks like. So the way you build high level Coliseum setups, and we're talking like tier 11, tier 12, is that all of your metals prior to the pet slot are just going to be used to buff the pet slot. Because one thing you have to know in high levels of PvE Coliseum is that at some point, the only metal that does damage is your pet slot metal, just simply because of the multiplier. So when we look at the multipliers on this Keyblade, my pet slot is 9.932, as opposed to my first slot, which is 8.132. The fifth slot is going to be 9.432. So at some point in Coliseum, you hit this wall where really only your pet is going to be doing any damage. So really all the metals that come before the pet slot are used to buff that pet slot metal. So one reason that Illustrated Zexion is good for high levels of Coliseum is because he does not need to be in an appropriate slot in order to give that metal strength buff. So for example here, this Terranord B gives metal strength with both his special attack and his Supernova attack, and it's going to be the same idea with Zexion. It's good to have metal strength buffing because it doesn't matter what your pet slot metal is in terms of attribute, because Zexion's still going to give that metal strength buff. So let's just say the metal that has the highest amount of strength, the highest multiplier, the best one you got is upright speed. Oh, Zexion's still going to buff that. Let's just say it's now reverse power. Zexion is still gonna buff that. So Zexion's really good for high levels of PvE Coliseum simply because he gives metal strength. Remember that in Coliseum, you still want to get as many defeat within 1 round skips as possible, and that makes Zexion a better metal for Coliseum as opposed to something like Supernova Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, Riku, or Kairi, because Sora, Riku, and Kairi hit their highest numbers on turn 2, whereas Zexion hits all of his buffs in 1 turn, which is really good. With Supernova Renew, you can stack a lot of metal strength with this guy. Remember that Zexion's multiplier is still good at a base 21.52. Remember that the last best reverse magic metal is going to be Master Xehanort with a 20.54 multiplier. So Zexion's multiplier is still respectable, being above 21. So yes, he can still be used for PvE. So who do I think should pull? Really, I only recommend this metal to people who really need a reverse magic metal, and we're talking about a desperate need for a reverse magic metal. Remember that this doesn't offer any buffs, so you have to have another metal that already gives general, reverse, and magic buffs and debuffs. I also only recommend this metal to people who already have good setups. Remember, not offering any form of buffing means you have to have another metal entirely, and it's likely that veterans or people who've been playing for a long time or people that have already done pulls on other banners beforehand already have metals that give general, reverse, and magic buffs and debuffs. So for beginners, this is a little bit deterring because it means they have to buy another metal, and that means they have to have another 15,000 jewels plus the additional 3,000 for traits. So the fact that it doesn't buff itself means that you have to have either things beforehand or you have to be ready to shell out more jewels to get buffing metals. So I only recommend it for people who already have good setups. Remember that JP anniversary, and this is my final tip for this, is September 3rd. It is the day after this banner goes away. And if you don't have 17,000 jewels minimum, I would save. Remember that anniversary only happens once a year, so you might as well be prepared as opposed to having a metal that might not be super great for you based on your circumstance. Remember that a lot of PvP enemies at high tiers might start having paralysis resist 100% on their keyblades, meaning that you'll never hit that 37.37 with Zexion. So keep in mind, Zexion's a really good metal if you already have other stuff, if you already have complete setups, but if you're a beginner or if you're kind of in that mid tier where you're trying to figure out still how to make great setups or what are great staple metals, this is likely going to be a skip for you. Especially with Anniversary, regardless of how long you've been playing this game, I recommend saving at least 17,000 jewels for Anniversary. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer them when I have the time. If you'd like to join my Discord, get some additional help off hours by the other Twilight Nights, the link is right there. Just type it into your URL and you should be good to go. But with that being said, that's all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.